Welcome back to Undercover Mysteries. Today, we follow the story of a diver who ventured into a cave with a long trail of tragedies behind it. Stay tuned, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. On April 6, 1985, in the quiet wilderness of Rockcastle County, Kentucky, three friends started what they believed would be a normal caving trip. The day probably felt like many of their other adventures: calm air, still trees, and that strange, exciting feeling you get when you are about to go underground. They were experienced, they were confident, and they were curious. Normally, those are good qualities for explorers, but on this day, that same combination would slowly pull them into the center of a nightmare they never expected. In front of them was the entrance to a place called Up and Down Cave. From the outside, it did not look like much. It was just a narrow crack in the ground, an opening that most people would walk past without even noticing. But that small crack led down into the unknown, into a dark world of stone, silence, and tight passages. The group consisted of three people: Christine, Jack Lewis, and Ben Harris. They had planned their route and knew what they wanted to do. Their main goal was to descend into a deep pit that could only be reached through a narrow vertical shaft about 70 feet long. Cavers call this type of passage a chimney. It is the kind of place where there is no space to turn around, where your body is pressed between the walls, and where even a small mistake can have serious, sometimes deadly consequences. The trio moved quickly and efficiently as they got ready to go down. They had done this sort of thing many times before, so the routine felt familiar. Christine watched carefully as Jack checked his harness, made sure his knots were secure, and then stepped over the edge of the opening. His rope slid smoothly through his belay device as gravity pulled him down, and soon his body disappeared into the black space below. Ben went next, following close behind Jack, his own rope humming softly against the rock. In just a short time, both men were gone from sight, swallowed by the darkness. Now alone at the top, Christine took a moment to adjust her gear. Her movements were steady, calm, and practiced. She checked her harness, looked at her rope, and made sure everything was correctly attached. When she felt ready, she clipped onto the rope and began her descent. At first, things went as expected. The chimney walls pressed in around her, rough and cold, and she could feel the dampness of the rock stealing the warmth from her hands through her gloves. Each time she slid a little farther down the rope, the light from the entrance above grew weaker. Far below her, Jack and Ben's voices echoed faintly up the shaft. She could hear that they were talking, but the words were soft and unclear, changed by the echoing shape of the cave. As she descended, the chimney slowly began to narrow. At first, it was only a little tighter, but soon the space around her shrank more and more, forcing her to turn her body at an angle to keep moving. She had to twist her shoulders and hips to find a path through the vertical crack. She moved with great care now, thinking through each small movement before making it, knowing there was little room for error. Meanwhile, Jack and Ben had already reached the bottom of the shaft. They unclipped from their ropes, coiled them up, and walked deeper into the cave. "Let's check this lead," Jack said, his excitement growing as he spotted a promising passage nearby. Ben nodded. They didn't wait for Christine. She was experienced, and they simply assumed she would join them soon, as she always did. Christine was about halfway down the chimney when the real trouble began. The walls suddenly narrowed much more sharply than before, squeezing her body from both sides. There was barely enough room for her chest and shoulders. She turned sideways to try to slide through the tightest part, but the rock pushed against her ribs and back. Above and below, there was only hard stone. Christine, however, was trapped. Her body was tightly wedged between the unforgiving rock walls. She could barely move her chest enough to breathe. Each breath was shallow and painful. Panic began to scratch at the edges of her mind as she realized her shouts for help were going nowhere. The thick rock around her swallowed her voice before it could travel far. She understood that Jack and Ben were too deep in the cave to hear her. She tried to shift her weight and pull herself free, but a sharp pain exploded in her chest. Her ribs, already stressed, seemed to grind against each other with every attempt. She knew something was very wrong. Sweat started to run down her face, mixing with the dust on her skin. Her breathing sped up, becoming quick and uneven. For a moment, she froze completely, pressed against the stone, afraid to move in any direction. But Christine was not ready to give up. Gathering what strength she still had, she decided to try again. She adjusted her gear as much as the narrow space allowed, trying to free a strap that had caught against the rock. On what felt like her final attempt, the strap finally came loose. With every bit of energy left in her tired body, she pulled herself upward and twisted, fighting through the crushing pressure on her ribs. At last, she managed to slide past the worst choke point of the chimney and suddenly slipped through the narrow opening. She lost control for a moment and dropped the remaining distance, landing hard on the cave floor below. She lay there on a narrow, rocky ledge, exhausted, bruised, and in deep pain. For a while, all she could do was breathe and try to stay calm. Somewhere farther inside the cave, Jack and Den kept moving, focused on the twisting tunnels in front of them. Their excitement about exploring new passages completely pushed aside any worry about why Christine was taking so long. Time passed, and finally, Christine forced herself to get up and start moving, even though every step hurt. Eventually, she followed their trail and found Jack and Ben examining yet another possible passage. When they turned and saw her, they were shocked. Christine's face was pale, her hair sticking to her skin, and sweat covered her forehead. She didn't need to say a single word. Her condition told the whole story. Her breathing was still shallow and rough, and her movements were slow and weak. Jack and Ben looked at each other with sudden panic, all their earlier excitement disappearing in an instant. Jack rushed to her side and gently put a steady hand on her shoulder to support her. Ben dug quickly through his pack, his hands shaking, and pulled out a water bottle, holding it out to her with a trembling hand, finally realizing just how close their friend had come to never walking out of that cave. Deep in the quiet forests of Hernando County, Florida, is a place that looks calm on the surface, but beneath it lies one of the most dangerous realms ever explored by divers. This is Dikeholder Springs, a cave system so deep, so unforgiving, that even the most experienced divers must earn permission just to enter it. Down there, the water is crystal clear, the walls echo with ancient geology, and silence wraps around you like a vacuum. But the beauty is a trap. Pressure is crushing, visibility can shift in seconds, and one wrong decision can seal your fate. Access is so restricted that a special program exists just to approve divers. You don't just show up with a certification card. You need advanced trimix training, deep cave experience, and a guide who knows every twist and turn. And these rules were written in blood. Over the years, Dikeholder has seen tragedies, including the infamous incident where a diver accidentally breathed from the wrong tank at extreme depth, a fatal mistake that echoed through the entire cave diving community. Yet despite its risks, Dikeholder remains a dream for explorers. It's a window into Florida's hidden aquifer, a place where divers salute the flag planted deep below the surface, and a reminder that the world still holds mysteries far below our feet. April 26, 1999, began like any other planned technical dive for 29-year-old Guido Gudenzi, an experienced diver who had spent 4 years navigating the demanding world of cave and mixed gas diving. This wasn't a recreational outing. It was a carefully planned descent into one of Florida's most challenging underwater environments. Accompanying him were 2 fellow divers, Simone Rancoli and Sandra Dirksen, both familiar with the intense demands of deep technical dives. Their objective that morning was straightforward: descend to a large underwater chamber at 190 feet, 58 meters, document the area, and return following strict decompression procedures. Each diver carried multiple tanks containing different breathing gases designed for different depths. These mixtures, combinations of oxygen, nitrogen, and helium, were essential for preventing narcosis, gas toxicity, and other life-threatening complications that occur under extreme pressure. Among these tanks was a pure oxygen bottle meant exclusively for the final decompression stage at 20 feet, 6 meters. At that shallow depth, pure oxygen helps flush nitrogen from the body and speeds up decompression. But at deeper levels, oxygen becomes a powerful toxin. At depths greater than 66 feet, 20 meters, breathing pure oxygen can trigger immediate seizures and rapid loss of consciousness. This is why divers leave their oxygen bottle clipped at the 20-foot mark before descending deeper, a universal rule in technical diving. But on this morning, Gidenzi kept his oxygen bottle with them, deciding not to leave it at the required spot. His reasoning was never determined. Some have speculated he didn't want to risk losing track of it. Others believe he simply broke routine without realizing the potential consequence. Whatever the motivation, that single choice became the crucial factor in everything that followed. At 190 feet, the chamber winded into a vast underwater cavern. They took photographs, examined the formations, and completed their planned observations. It was a calm, controlled dive. Exactly the kind of environment a trained diver like Gidenzi felt comfortable in. After finishing their documentation, the three began their ascent. This phase of the dive is always the most delicate. As divers rise, gases dissolved in their tissues must be released gradually. Ascending too quickly traps these gases in the bloodstream, causing decompression sickness, a condition that can cripple or kill even a strong, experienced diver. Their ascent included several mandatory decompression stops. The first major one was at 120 feet, 37 meters, where they were required to pause long enough for their bodies to adjust to the decreasing pressure. The water was silent. The divers hovered motionlessly, monitoring their gauges and maintaining breathing discipline. And then, in that stillness, the incident unfolded. For reasons that would never be firmly established, Gidenzi reached for the oxygen bottle he had carried from the surface and switched to it. To this day, divers debate why. At 120 feet, divers can experience confusion or mild narcosis, a fogged judgment similar to being mildly intoxicated. Stress, fatigue, or distraction can also lead to automatic habits, like switching to a particular tank without checking labels. The moment pure oxygen entered his lungs at that depth, oxygen toxicity struck instantly. His body reacted violently. Within seconds, he went into a full convulsive seizure, his limbs jerking uncontrollably. His regulator, the device delivering his breathing gas, slipped from his mouth. The clear, calm water around them turned into a chaotic emergency. Rancoli and Dirksen recognized the situation immediately. They tried to stabilize him, hold his equipment in place, and reinsert his regulator, but his convulsions made it almost impossible. At that depth, every movement requires effort. Their own breathing rates increased from the stress, consuming precious gas, while they struggled to control the violent motions of an unconscious diver. They faced an impossible situation. They couldn't ascend rapidly. Doing so would kill them both through severe decompression sickness. They couldn't keep Gidenzi's regulator in place long enough to restore his breathing, and they couldn't stop the convulsions. Every attempt they made was countered by the brutal reality of physics and pressure. Minutes passed as they fought to save him, but there was nothing else to be done. Gidenzi lost consciousness completely, his seizure ending only because his body could no longer fight back. Without a working breathing system in his mouth, his chances of survival were gone. Now the two surviving divers had their own lives to protect. With heavy hearts and dwindling gas supplies, they made the agonizing decision to leave their friend and continued their decompression schedule. It was the only rational choice left. When they finally reached air and reported the accident, the diving community was stunned. Experienced divers simply do not breathe oxygen at depth. The rule is absolute. Later, recovery divers retrieved Gidenzi's body from deep within the system. The investigation found no equipment malfunction. The oxygen bottle worked exactly as designed. The disaster hinged entirely on a single procedural error, bringing pure oxygen to a depth where it becomes lethal. The incident soon became a major case study in technical diving education worldwide. It illustrates how unforgiving deep diving truly is, and how even one overlooked step can erase years of experience in a single breath. The tragedy that claimed Guido Gidenzi's life was rooted in one critical deviation from established procedure. Technical divers rely on strict gas management rules because the margin for error at depth is nearly zero. By choosing to carry his pure oxygen bottle instead of leaving it at the 20-foot decompression stop, Gidenzi introduced a hazard that should never have been present during the deep portion of the dive. At 120 feet, confusion, stress, narcosis, or simple habit may have influenced his decision to switch to the wrong tank. Nothing in the investigation suggested equipment failure or external factors. His oxygen system functioned exactly as designed. It became deadly only because it was used at the wrong depth. Once he inhaled pure oxygen under extreme pressure, oxygen toxicity took over instantly, triggering convulsions that prevented both breathing and rescue. The cause was not lack of skill, but a single moment of misjudgment. This incident could have been prevented through one simple but essential protocol: leaving pure oxygen bottles at the correct decompression depth. That single procedure eliminates the possibility of breathing oxygen at a fatal depth, even during moments of stress or confusion. Standard markings, gas checks, and buddy verification also exist to help divers avoid misidentifying tanks, steps that, when followed consistently, make tank switch errors virtually impossible. Another preventative factor is mental readiness. Deep dives require divers to recognize early signs of cognitive fog, narcosis, or decision fatigue, and to slow down before making equipment changes.